Hey YouTube, this is the Woman282 back again with another tech repair video, and here I have a Sega Game Gear. I picked this thing up at Goodwill for I think $3. It had a copy of Game Gear Shinobi in it, so that's pretty cool. Came with the game. I got it home, I plugged it up, and it does work, but it's got some serious problems. First off, a really common problem with Game Gears is the screen is distorted and there's basically no sound. That's because of the there's electrolytic capacitors inside that have dried out and they need to be replaced. Another cause of the bad capacitors is power won't stay on. So when you either using batteries or you plug it up through the DC jack, turn the power on and the unit turns right back off all by itself. So to remedy that, what I have figured out is you can leave the power on for about 15 or 30 seconds, turn the unit off and turn it back on, and it should power on then. If it doesn't, you have to do it again. So yeah, we got a power issue. Buttons right here, the 1, 2 and start are sticky. They can't be used pretty much. The D-pad isn't too bad. It's still got some click to it, but I'm going to go ahead and clean it anyway while we're inside. And I don't know if you can see this on screen, but there is a lot of dust inside the behind the screen protector. There's so much dust that it's really hard to play, to play a game, and it's ridiculous. Like how does that much dust get inside a Game Gear? It's amazing. But anyway, we're going to clean the dust out of there, and then inside this right-hand battery cover here, we have some battery corrosion. It'll still read that battery if you put one in, but it needs to be cleaned anyway, and it kind of bothers me. But yeah, those are all the problems. So what I'm going to do is going to plug it up right here, and I'm going to try to demonstrate about what's going on here. So, but if I turn this on, it turns right back off like this. So in order to remedy this, I have to turn it on for about, I don't know, 15 or 30 seconds, and sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. Sometimes it'll come on the first time, so it's kind of random. So turn this on. Hey, it turned on. That's awesome. But anyway, if you look at it straight on, you basically can't see the screen. You've got to hold it at an angle. The volume is turned all the way up, and there's no sound. Buttons are, you can use the buttons, but they are very, very sticky and basically unusable. So yeah, that's what we're working with here. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this thing apart, give it a real good clean. We're going to replace those bad capacitors, and we're going to get this thing back in working order. So let's go ahead and get to it. Alright, so let's go over some of the tools and parts you're going to need to be able to fix your Game Gear. So first off, you're going to need some alcohol, 91% alcohol, and some Q-tips. The reason I say this is because there are electrolytic capacitors inside. I expect them to be leaking at least a little bit, so I want to clean that up. Just to keep the corrosive fluid from corroding any more traces or solder joints or anything like that. You're going to need a soldering iron, solder, and a wet sponge for your soldering iron to clean it. You need a number 1 screwdriver. I'm going to be using a bit and a hex driver right here. I cannot find my just single screwdriver that's size number 1, so I have to use a number 0. But if you're real careful, you can use a number 0, but I can't find my number 1, so, because this actually won't fit into the screw holes in the back, so I have to use this. This is just a plain flathead small screwdriver. I'm going to be using this for scraping out that battery leakage or junk out of the battery compartment. Otherwise you don't need a flathead. This is just a poking tool. You can use this to pry off capacitors, and if you need to move them around a little bit, you can do that. You're going to need some needle nose pliers to break the glue off of the capacitors. You'll need a 4.5mm security game bit tool You can get these online on eBay, Amazon, anywhere online really. But you need one of those. If you don't have one, you can use the old lighter and big pen method, I guess. But yeah, I use one of these. You need some flux for your soldering iron here. You're gonna need some helping hands are going to come in real handy, and you're going to need your capacitors. So this is a Sega Game Gear capacitor replacement kit. I got this from Nintendo Repair Hut. I'm not affiliated with them in any kind of way. It's just who I bought it from. I actually bought this particular package off of eBay, since they sell on eBay. But I'll include a link in the description of where you can buy that from, and their homepage and everything. But in the package they include all the capacitors that you will need. It doesn't matter what version Game Gear you have, since there's 3 different motherboard revisions. They include all the capacitors for it, doesn't matter. So you buy the kit, it'll fix any Game Gear. Depending on what revision motherboard you have, you'll have some capacitors left over, but that's okay, as long as your Game Gear gets fixed. But yeah, I'll include a link in the description. The replacement kit plus shipping, I think, cost me around $15 max. So not too bad. And of course you're going to need your broken Game Gear. So let's go ahead and get this thing open. So in order to take apart your Game Gear, you need to flip the unit over, take out your copy of Streets of Rage 2, which is awesome, lay it to the side. You need to remove both battery covers. And here we have all the screws exposed. So here at the top we have that game bit. This is the only one in the whole system, but you do need that driver to take this game bit screw out. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 Phillips head screws. These are size number 1, and those need to come out. And that's all that's holding this thing in. Once you get those 7 screws out, you can actually lift the back cover and fold it over. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so here's the Game Gear opened up for you to kind of see what's going on here. I'm going to go ahead and identify the version of this motherboard for you. So look right here, we have these 2 ICs and we have these 2 ICs. Basically this means that it's a, for lack of a better word, version 1. There are 3 different versions. Version 1 only looks like this. There's a version 2 and a version 3, which both look the same. They have different capacitor layouts, very slightly, but they do have different capacitor layouts. So if you have a, for lack of a better word, version 1, which is this, you can look right here on the side right here, and you can identify what kind of version you have. It says Sega, it has some bunch of numbers, IC board, Game Gear, main, USA. Yours could say something completely different. But basically, since this is a version 1, there's basically no version number. If you have a version 2, for lack of a better word, it'll say VA1 right here. If you have a version 3, it'll say VA4. So basically, when I say, there's 3 different versions of the motherboard, that's actually not quite correct. But basically you can identify what version you have by looking at the small number. If there is no VA number, you have a version 1. If it says VA1, you have a version 2. If it says VA4, you have a version 3. So that's just kind of a simplified way to identify which Game Gear you have. Now, from what I understand, these version 1s are very common. You almost never find a version 2 or version 3. But if you do happen to have a version 2 or version 3, there's a very easy way to identify it. You buy the model number here, but right offhand, just by looking inside, if you have a version 2 or version 3, this chip right here, the IC here on the right, will be missing. and you'll have a different kind of chip over here, and then you'll have like one really big chip right here. So that's a really easy way to identify it from a version 1. But again, you can look at the version number and identify it that way too. I don't have a version 2 or 3 to show you, but I want to go ahead and throw a picture up so you can to help you identify if you have a different one than this one. But what we're going to go ahead and do, we're going to go separate the back from the front. And to do that, you have 2 ribbon cables and a speaker cable. So I'm going to zoom in here, and this board right here, this is the power board. You see the power switch right here. You have a ribbon cable that goes up to it, so we're going to disconnect this one. It just pops right out. And we'll disconnect the other one. Again, it just pops right out. And then we have a real small one right here, and this is actually the speaker cable. It's just got 2 wires. This goes to the speaker, and we're going to remove that one too. And there we go. Alright, so we have the back part of the Game Gear separated from the front, and we're just going to leave this to the side. We're going to come back to it. But right here, here's what we're interested in for the moment. This is the main board and motherboard for the Game Gear. Alright, so the version 1 Game Gear has a total of 11 capacitors on the motherboard. The version 2 and version 3 have 1 extra, making it 12. But I'm just going to kind of point out what the capacitors look like, because they don't look normal like you'd see in any other piece of electronics. So basically, there are these black and white squares. They're all over this side, and then there's one on the opposite side, or I'm sorry, 2 on the opposite side. So you have this real big long one here, and you got a couple here and here and here, and then you have these 4 right here. And these are the capacitors that are going bad. And then over here on this side, you have one here, and you have one here. So we need to replace those. And first one I'm going to do is I'm going to go over and I'm going to look at the capacitors and see if they're leaking or not, because you know, working with Xboxes for so long, I kind of guessing it is, and I'll probably have to clean some of that corrosion off there if I do happen to find any. So we're going to zoom in real close and kind of show you what I'm talking about here. Alright, so here's a really close view of capacitor 35 and capacitor 49, and then we have this transistor here. For some reason it's designated D4. I don't know why. It should be designated with a Q for transistor, but whatever. But you can see, it's got a little bit hard to tell, but you can see right here between the 2 capacitors and on this capacitor here, this small brown one, there is some leakage from the capacitors. Not necessarily from the brown one, but from these 2 electrolytic capacitors. So they are leaking. They are indeed leaking. So that has to be cleaned up, and then it's a little bit hard to see but on this transistor here, on this on the base leg, it's actually turned green where the capacitor has been leaking out. So I would consider this a major problem. As long as it's not, you know, serious, you know, it's going to be okay. But you know, any leakage from a capacitor is kind of serious. So that needs to be cleaned off, so that there's no more fluid that's going to damage any of the components. So that's what I'm talking about when I said I needed Q-tips and alcohol. We want to clean that. We want to clean this residue off, because this is we're in the danger zone. So I'm not going to do it all at once. When I remove a capacitor, I'm going to clean around it and then replace it with a new one. That's how I'm going to do it, just to keep track of what I'm doing. But yeah, I just wanted to show you that there is some corrosion. Alright, so here's a really close-up view of the soundboard, and you can see this capacitor right here. This is capacitor 5. You see on both sides there is some corrosion on both of these terminals here, and that's not supposed to be there. So yeah, these capacitors are definitely failing, and they need to be replaced. This larger capacitor right here on this side, it seems to be okay, but you know, they're all going to get replaced anyway, because I don't like this. This is bad news. So yeah, just to reinforce my point that the capacitors are leaking. Alright, so here on my computer I have basically a parts list of all the capacitors that are inside the Game Gear and then their respective values. This is a PDF. If you want to download this, a link's going to be in the description. This actually comes from Nintendo Repair Hut, and it's actually a very good guide or index to what you need, and it tells you exactly how to fix it if you don't know how. So I actually highly recommend downloading this. Very good information. But basically, this is my motherboard. We have the 2 ASIC capacitor index. That means we have the two ICs that I mentioned earlier on the version 1 motherboard. But it tells you the capacitor designators, it tells you all the numbers, and it tells you their values. Now this is on the motherboard. Now if we scroll down, we have the audio board, and it tells you those capacitors and their values. And then we scroll down a little bit more, and we have the power board and the designators and their values too. So yeah, very good information coming from Nintendo Repair Hut, I gotta say. Alright, so here are all the capacitors laid out that I'm going to need to go in my Game Gear specifically. And the great thing about this kit is they're all labeled. So this one is 100 microfarads, 4 volts, and it tells you how many is in there is one capacitor. And then this one is 22 microfarads, 6.3 volts capacity, or quantity 4, and there's 4 in there. It's really great. You can actually look at the guide that I showed you on the computer, pick out what you need for your model of motherboard, and then that's all you need. Now they do include capacitors for the audio boards, and they label that one. It says audio quality capacitor. It tells you there's 3 in here, and then they also give you some for the power board, and they did not label it power. I had to label it myself. I just wrote power on it, just so I would know. But looking at the PDF, it's not hard to figure out at all. Just look at the values. Now these down here, these are actually leftover. I don't need these. These actually go in version 2 and 3 Game Gears. So these are just spare parts for me. But these are all the ones that I'm going to need to fix the capacitors. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get started replacing these capacitors. So what I want to do first is I want to remove this light reflector here, this big silver part, because it's made of plastic, and it's right here beside this capacitor C1. It's like a little leg sticking out, and I don't want to touch it with my soldering iron and melt it. So what I've done is I've removed all 4 screws, and I'm just going to go ahead and take it out just so it's not in my way. There's a fluorescent tube that runs in the middle of this, and basically this just sits on top of it. But just be very careful that you don't rip the fluorescent tube out or break it or anything, because it is glass. So do not break it. But you're just going to lift up here on the top and just going to kind of work it out. Just going to have to wiggle it a little bit, but with a little bit of force it'll come out like that. You see it's highly reflective, and it just helps shine the fluorescent light onto the screen. Do not touch the inside of that, because it's reflective. It's meant to be that way. And put it in a dust-free place, where it won't get any trash on the reflector part. But here's the tube, and here are the capacitors that we need to replace. And I just wanted to get that out of the way. So we'll take a look at capacitor C1. Alright, so here's a real close-up view of capacitor C1. You can see the designator right there. It says C1. And this capacitor is 33 microfarads and 6.3 volts. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle nose pliers and we're just going to grip it on both sides, and we're just going to rock it a little bit to break the glue underneath, because these are glued down. So I'm going to do that real quick. Be real gentle. We just want to break that glue just like that. And I'm going to pull it up just a little bit like that. All right, then we're going to take our soldering iron and we're going to desolder this capacitor. And I just want to make it very clear that it is of great importance that you do not get these capacitors mixed backwards. So just take note that positive is on this side and negative is on this side. It's actually, you know, it's actually written on the capacitor, but it's not written on the board. So before you take the capacitor off, just make sure you know what you're doing. You just remember that the right side is positive and the left side is negative, because installing a capacitor backwards, especially an electrolytic one, is bad news. They can explode if you're, if the voltage is high enough. So yeah, just be real careful that you install these correctly. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and desolder this one. So these are surface mounted, so they're real easy to take off. You just grip it with your finger, and then you're going to touch the right leg here. Just melt it and take it off. And then I'm going to touch the other leg. And do the positive leg once more. There we go. And it popped off. I don't know if you heard that fizzling sound, but that was probably some of that leaking out electrolytic fluid. But anyway, here is the capacitor. That's what it looks like. And here we have our solder joints. These are good and clean, as for what they are. I have to clean it up a little bit with some alcohol and a Q-tip, but just make sure you don't destroy these pads. If you destroy them, you might be able to retrace it back to where they go, maybe not. So yeah, just be real careful that you don't destroy the pads. Just take your time and be patient. But I'm going to go ahead and clean these pads off with some alcohol. So I'm going to take my Q-tip and I'm just going to run it over here just to make sure it's clean. And I'm going to dry it off. There we go. So when you take your capacitor out of your bag, it's going to look like something like this. It's going to have just two straight legs, and so what that means is you're going to have to shape the legs so that they'll fit correctly onto the motherboard. So what I've done, I've just kind of bent these like this so that it'll lay down on the motherboard, something like this. And of course I want to trim these off to make them shorter, but you can kind of see what I'm getting at here. Basically the two leads are going to lay down. Alright, so I've cut off the legs of the capacitor. You can see they're still bent, and I'm just going to place it on here. I don't think it's going to fit at first, but we can fix that. I'm just going to place it on here, kind of see where I'm at. And I do need to widen the contacts just a little bit because it doesn't quite fit, so I'm going to go ahead and widen those a bit. And there we go, that's perfect. Right there. So I just want to remind you that you do not want to install these backwards. So when you look at your capacitor, you'll notice it has a gray stripe or whatever kind of color stripe. As long as the stripe is on there, that stripe means that that pin is negative. The pin that does not have a stripe, like this, that side is positive. You really need to make sure that you install these correctly. Do not install these backwards, or they could explode. But they're gonna fail either way. So this slot actually is marked positive right here, but looking at the old capacitor, we see that positive was on the right side and negative was on the left side, and then negative is marked gray. So this is the same thing. We have the gray stripe and then no stripe on the right. So we're just going to lay it just like that, and that is ready for installation. Now, another note I want you to make note of: there's these gold areas on the motherboard. I'll show you some more in just a minute, but these gold areas, make sure your capacitor is not laying anywhere inside this gold area, because that is where the back shell lays on the motherboard and basically holds it in. So yeah, don't lay your capacitor anywhere inside the gold area. So I'm going to go ahead and prep these pads, take that capacitor out, and I'm going to take my soldering iron and some solder, and I'm just going to touch these pads up just to give them a little bit extra solder. Just like that. And then this one, just a little bit extra solder, just like that. Just some fresh solder. Then we'll take my capacitor and lay it in the general area. And I'm just going to hold it with my finger. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to tack it in. Okay, and that's the positive side. And that's the negative side. So I'm going to go ahead and check to make sure that my capacitor is installed firmly. So I'm just going to give it a little tug, and it's not going anywhere. Joint looks good and strong. So yeah, that's how you install a capacitor onto the motherboard. Lucky for us, they're surface mounted, so it makes it much easier to put these in. You don't have to put them through holes. So yeah, right now I'm looking at my computer, and remember that PDF, this was a capacitor C1, and the value that the computer told me was 33 microfarads at 6.3 volts. So the capacitor I took out of the bag was 33 microfarads, 6.3 volts, and that's it. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You just go down each capacitor designator, which is, you know, C1, then C3, and etc. And then you remove the capacitor, clean the pads off, and install the new one, and then, you know, you'll be done in no time. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and continue with C3 here, and I'm going to work my way up and just do the rest of them. So when I get done with that, we'll move on to the soundboard and the power board. Alright, so I'm done replacing all the capacitors on the main board. You should have, if you had a version 1, you should have had 11 capacitors total, but on this side you would have had 9, so you had 1 here, 4 here on this side, 2 here on this side, and then 2 here on the bottom. And then moving on here to the other side, you'd have had 1 here and 1 here. Now notice that my capacitors do not touch the gold, you know, like little circles or whatever they are. They're actually cleared away from those, because what these are like contact points for the rear of the casing, and it's got little columns that push down on this and basically keep the main board steady, I guess you'd say. So if your capacitor's in the way, it'll get crushed if it's in the way of these gold circles. So just keep those, just kind of bend them out of the way a little bit. I had to bend that one a little bit more than I normally would have, but you know, it's okay. As long as it's soldered properly, it's okay. So now we're going to move on to the soundboard. Alright, so here we have the rear of the unit, and this board right here is a soundboard, and this is the power board. In order to get the soundboard out, we have to remove this metal flashing here that covers the cartridge slot. So we have 4 number 1, actually that's actually a size number 0 Phillips head screws, so we're going to take those out. Alright, we're just going to lift the flashing off like that. Be careful not to crush it, just put it somewhere safe because it is very fragile. Alright, and now we can get to the soundboard here, and it has just 2 screws holding it in, so we're going to take those out as well. Alright, and here's our soundboard. Alright, so here's a closer look. We have 5 capacitors on this board. These are all surface mount. So we have these 3 on top, this one, and then this one here on the bottom. So yeah, this is where your helping hands is going to come in. So we just want to put this board in the helping hands, and we'll go ahead and get to desoldering. Okay, so I went ahead and removed this capacitor number 2 off camera just to kind of familiarize myself with it, and let me tell you, it is difficult, and I want to show you why. Because the capacitor has really long legs that go underneath it, so you have to desolder this whole pad right here, which goes underneath the capacitor, and it's a little bit difficult. So, and it's even more difficult on this one because these capacitors are leaking and they're corroding the solder, and so I have to like scrape it off real gently, or get some alcohol and a Q-tip and scrub it off, and then I might be able to get a good heat transfer from soldering iron. So yeah, it's definitely not easy for me. Hopefully yours is not this bad. If it's not, this is really a whole lot easier, but this is kind of difficult for me just because of the corrosion. So basically what I did was I took a little tool and I just, you know, scraped the corrosion off the best I could on both sides. So back here on this side too, scrape it off, being careful not to scratch any traces, just gently scrape it off the best I can. Then I'll get a Q-tip and some alcohol, and I'll just wipe that little thing down, the solder joint on this capacitor, just wipe it off on both sides. And even then, it might not be clean enough to make a good heat transfer. But I'm going to go ahead and try it. So put a little bit of solder on my iron. And the only way I know how to do this is to take my fingernail, and put it right there on the capacitor, apply heat to the joint, and then as it heats up, kind of pull that side off. But if you do this, you can burn yourself, so you might have to do it, you know, within intervals. So let's go ahead and try this. It's getting a little bit too hot, like I said. I'm also going to apply some flux here to help it move along. See if that helps a bit. And as you can see, it's pretty difficult. So I'm just going to keep trying this until I get it off. Alright, there's that side, finally. and you see it's kind of loose now. And I'm going to attempt to do the other side. And that side came off. It's still a little bit attached. So I'm going to do a little bit more. There we go. And there's the bottom of it. That one came out pretty clean. This one did not. This one here did not come out very clean. It was kind of corroded up, but this one's not too bad. But as you can see, the reason it's so difficult to get off is because the leads are kind of, stuck up underneath the capacitor. But now that this one's off, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my Q-tip and alcohol, and I'm going to clean this this area up. Get the flux off and any kind of corrosion that I can. And we'll take a little bit more flux again and go over the pads. And we'll take my iron again, and I'm going to prep these pads for soldering. Like this. And you can kind of see some of the dirt that's off to the side of the solder pad here. That's actually the corrosion that's not sticking to the solder, and we can actually wipe that off. So I'm just going to do that a little bit. And then again, we're going to take our Q-tip and we're going to wipe that off, all that corrosion, so that we have a clean soldering surface. And let me tell you, this is tedious work, because not only do you have to try your best to get the capacitor off, you have to remove the corrosion off the leads and prep them and everything like that. If these weren't corroded, it wouldn't be so bad. Alright, so here's the soundboard done, finally. It took me a long time to do this, mostly because of getting the capacitors off. All the corrosion and stuff just really hindered my progress. But I did eventually get it all off. I had to clean the pads with some flux and some fresh solder over and over to get, the pads to actually hold anything, but I eventually did it. I had to put some of these in some weird positions so that they would fit in the case. Like this one right here, I had to lay it down beside this integrated circuit and kind of I had to solder it like that, and then this one here on the top, I had to do some funky lead work right there to get it to lay down. But this one, and this one are all standing up. That one's actually kind of funky too, but it is standing up. But they're all soldered in correctly. Make sure that they're not in backwards. Make absolutely sure they're not in backwards, because you can ruin your capacitors, or they could blow up or explode, or bad things happen if you put them in backwards. So make sure they're in properly. These are right here we have the back of the case, and to show you what I'm talking about, this fits right in here, just like that. And then you have the shielding here that slips right on right there, and you can see why I had to lay these two down so it would fit underneath this part of the shielding. The other two didn't matter because they were just standing up. But yeah, I had to go back and measure about where I needed them to be laying down and everything. But Yeah, audio board is finished. Freaking finally. Now we're going to move on to the power board. Here's our audio board on this side. So what you need to do first is remove 2 screws. There's one here above the little connector piece, and then there's one right here beside this capacitor. So once you have the 2 screws removed, you have to remove this black part. Not remove it, but it's like taped on or like glued. It's got some sort of adhesive on the bottom, so you actually have to kind of pry it off before you can take the circuit board out. So just going to take my little tool here, and I'm just going to gently push it underneath. I'm just going to pry that glue up a little bit. Shouldn't take too much effort. And then there's a little bit here on the side too, where it turns down. Just like that. And it should come out. Let's see. Yeah, just like that. We'll set the case to the side. And here's our circuit board, our power circuit board, and you can go ahead and take the switch off. Just a little note. Switch, the bottom of the switch looks like this, got like 3 little ridges on it. The middle ridge goes toward the top of the switch, like this, otherwise it won't fit in. So yeah, just a little note. But we have 3 capacitors on this board. That's here, here, and here. These are the 2, or not capacitors. But these are not surface mounted. These are actually mounted to the bottom of the circuit board, and we're going to have to desolder them the old-fashioned way with some desoldering braid. You know, no problem. Probably a little bit more effort, but we'll get it. So I'm going to rig this thing up in my helping hands, and we're going to get to it. Alright, so here's the bottom of the circuit board. What I want to do right now is just clean off the areas where the capacitors are, so that I'll have a clean soldering surface. So the capacitors are located here, here, and here. So I'm going to take my Q-tip and alcohol, and I'm just going to go along the bottom, clean off anything that might be there, just because I want a clean soldering surface. Alright, now I'm going to take my Sharpie. I'm just going to draw like a little dot beside the points that I need to desolder, just so I don't forget. So I'm going to put a little dot right there. Yeah, right there. Put one right here. And then one right here. Just so I don't forget. And then I'm going to take my flux. I'm just going to put a little coat of flux on there. And we are ready to desolder. Alright, so we have our desoldering braid here, and I'm just going to traditionally just desolder these 2 points right here, right below capacitor 12. So put the solder braid on there. Just going to suck that solder off. Alright, so I have tried my best to desolder these 2 points right here on capacitor 13, and I just can't do it. I was using my desoldering braid, or trying to at least, but I don't think my iron is getting hot enough because it's a low wattage iron. If I had a variable temperature iron, it probably wouldn't be a problem, but I don't. So what these are actually cold solder joints, and I took the capacitor, the new capacitor, and I fit one leg in and melted the solder and kind of pushed the leg through and did it to this side. And I just went back and forth and I just kind of walked it in to the two holes here. And eventually it got to the point where the solder joint turned cold and I was able to just kind of wiggle it in. I didn't have to keep soldering back and forth. So right now the capacitor's in, but it's not really soldered in. And I have to cut off the leg. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put some flux on these 2 points here, and then I'm going to resolder in these legs. Alright, there's that one. As you can probably tell, my iron isn't really hot enough for soldering these joints. I don't know why, because it normally works. Maybe these are just extra thick or something for whatever reason. But I'm going to do this one as well. Alright, and that one's soldered on there too. So for me, it's taking a bit of extra work to get these in. But as long as I don't have a cold solder joint, that's what I'm really worried about. So just gonna snip off these little extras. And those solder joints are pretty good. They're not perfect though, so I want to try to reflow them just a little bit, like that, and like that. There we go. So those are good. So like I said, I was having some trouble with my desoldering braid when I was trying to desolder this capacitor. Basically, it just wouldn't take up anything because my iron's not hot enough. So in order to desolder this capacitor right here, what I actually had to do, the first one, is I had to put my finger on the opposite side over here and then desolder one joint, and as I did that I would pull on the side and just kind of pull it out of the socket a little bit, and then I would do it the other way like that, and I would just kind of walk it back out, just going alternating both ways, kind of walk it out as I desolder it. So yeah, it's not the ideal way to do this, but you know, with the problem I'm having right now, that's the only way to do it. So once I get all of these desoldered, I'm going to put new capacitors in and we'll move on. Alright, so I'm on the last capacitor right now. This capacitor and this capacitor are the new ones. They've been replaced. And I removed the third capacitor, and I just want to show you this. See all this nasty gunk on the circuit board? This capacitor has been leaking on the circuit board, and that's probably one of the reasons why it wouldn't turn on. I don't know if you can tell, but on the bottom of this capacitor, it's all gunky and black. And this surface right here is not clean, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a Q-tip and alcohol and clean that off real good. And I'm going to install that capacitor. So yeah, always check for your leaking capacitors, because that's a major problem. Alright, here's the finished power board. I kind of goofed up a little bit on this third capacitor I was talking about just a minute ago. You see it's not actually sitting on the board, it's standing up. And the reason for that is when I was trying to you know, kind of walk it through the solder joints, one of the pads started to lift off the board. So at that point I just went ahead and cut my losses and just left it you know, standing or hovering above the circuit board. Definitely don't want a lifted pad, that's bad news. But it's okay at this point, so I'm just going to go ahead and reinstall it into the case. Here's the case. I'm just going to drop it in here along with our power switch. Power switch has three little knobs. The top, or the middle knob, goes on top, and just going to lay it on in there, just like that. I'm going to re-sticky this onto the case. And it's firmly seated. And just one more reminder, make sure your capacitors are turned the right way. Again, bad news if you don't. And then we're just going to put those screws back in. Okay, so we're done fixing both halves of the case here. You know, we've replaced all the capacitors, so now it's time to remove the motherboard and the screen and clean the case out with some compressed air. I don't have a can of compressed air, I have an air compressor out of the shop, so I'm going to remove the motherboard and carefully remove the screen. The screen's attached to it, and remove the buttons and the pads and blow it all out, and then I'll get to cleaning the pads and any kind of leftover dust if I need to. I'm also going to blow out this back portion. Not really much to it, I'm just going to blow it out. It ain't too bad, it's not really dusty at all, but there is a little bit, so I'm going to blow these two out. But first we need to take out the motherboard, so we're going to go ahead and do that. So all the screws are removed. Now we want to grip the cartridge slot here. We want to pull the left side up a little bit so that we can get this the brightness wheel out. So we're just going to pull it up and just kind of pull that brightness wheel out like that. And then don't just take the board out, because the screen right here is attached. So I find that the best way to do it is actually hold it like this, and you kind of lift the case off like so, so that your screen lays down. Now depending on how nasty your Game Gear is, you'll see a bunch of dust and you might have some buttons sticking around. So just going to take these buttons off like this. And you also see this like black border. It's actually foam, and it just like sits on the screen. And it actually fits into the case here before you put the screen in. So, but yeah, that's in there. But here's the Game Gear, the front side of the Game Gear. It's pretty nasty. There's a bunch of dust everywhere. The screen definitely got some dust on it, like I said earlier. But no problem. We can blow it off with some compressed air. I'm going to go ahead and warn you, do not wipe this screen off with anything. I mean, it will scratch. So you really need to use compressed air. Even a paper towel will scratch it. You might be able to get away with like a microfiber cloth or something, but to me it's too risky unless I just have to use it. So I'm just going to use compressed air to blow the screen off and everything around it. So I'm just going to set this motherboard to the side. Here we have the little foam square, and then here we have the D-pad and the contacts, and we have a 1, 2, and start and their contacts. So the buttons I'm going to clean separately with some alcohol, but the case, these little contacts, but the case I'm going to take out and blow it out too. And whatever I can't get out, I'll just you know, get out with some alcohol and a Q-tip. The screen protector, you can probably safely clean it with a paper towel. Just be careful not to scrub too hard, because you might scratch it. And there's also some crevices around here that actually, where this the gray border is, you're going to have to use some compressed air to blow that out the best you can if you have to do this. But yeah, that's the plan. So I'm going to take everything out to the shop and clean it all and everything, and bring it back in here and clean up anything else that I have to get rid of. Alright, I'm back from blowing everything out. Here I have the front of the case. While I was blowing the case out, I had to press my finger up against the screen protector, and I got some fingerprints on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a Q-tip and some alcohol, and I'm just going to just kind of wipe those fingerprints off like this. And it's left a little bit of residue, so I'm going to take the clean end. I'm just going to kind of polish it a little bit. And we should look at it in the light, kind of at an angle, and it's pretty clean. A little bit of speck of dust right there. There we go. Alright, the back side is clean. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, you know, my Q-tip again, and I'm going to go run through the button holes here, and there's a bunch of dust, like black dust or whatever is in here around the button holes, and that's pretty much it for the front side. I can clean the outside later, but yeah, I just want to get the gunk out of the button holes here. So I'm just going to take my Q-tip, I'm just going to kind of run it around here. And you see there's a bunch of black dirt or whatever is in here clogging up these button holes. That's probably what was making the button stick earlier. But yeah, it's pretty nasty, so I'm going to keep doing this until I get this cleaned, and then we're going to work on cleaning the battery compartment. Alright, so here's the battery loop we need to clean up. I'm just going to take a screwdriver and gently scrape it off best I can. Really not much to it, but after I get the majority of it scraped off, I'm going to go over it with a Q-tip and some alcohol, and just try to get it cleaned up the best I can. You can see there's like a bunch of junk and stuff on this. So yeah, I'm just going to keep going at it. And take our Q-tip and alcohol. I'm just going to try to get all this out. And yeah, it's really nasty. Alright, so it's pretty much cleaned out. I'm just going to go ahead and get the residue out that's been left behind. Just going to give it just a final once over. It's like this, and there's a little bit in there, so just want to, yeah, like that. Battery terminal's a little bit corroded, just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some sandpaper and try my best to sand off the terminal so we'll get a better connection. So here's my sandpaper, and I'm just going to gently go over it with the sandpaper. Alright, so that's not too bad. It's coming off. So I'm just going to do a little bit more here on the bottom of the terminal. Alright, so that's pretty good. Terminal's pretty clean right now. So there's a little bit of dust in there, so I'm going to blow it out. And then we're going to take a Q-tip again, and we're going to just wipe out any of that residue, that dust from the sandpaper. Alright, there we go. You can see there's like whatever leaked out of the battery is actually stained the plastic, and that's not going to come out. But I'm not too worried about that. It's just a stain, and it's in the battery compartment, so you can't see it. But I'm just worried about the batteries working. If I ever decided I needed to use batteries, and it worked before, but you know, I just want to clean that up. So battery compartment's done. The back half is cleaned out. The front half is cleaned out, and now it's time to clean the buttons and the contact points. So we have our buttons here, and then we have our contacts. So what I like to do, and I'm just going to go over these buttons like this. You can also wash these in with like soap and water, but I'm not near a sink right now, so I'm just going to do it this way. And you can see there's just a whole bunch of black junk on these buttons, so I'm going to give these a real good clean, and clean the contacts. Alright, so start button's done. Now we're going to clean the contact for the start button. So we're just going to, you know, just gently wipe the dust off like that, and also inside. Now if you look at your contact, this one kind of seems to have it. If you look at it in like the angle of the light, it might be the black part might be shiny or something, and that just means it's been heavily used, and you basically need to scrub that off with a Q-tip and alcohol until you just get a flat black color. It just basically you're scrubbing off the metal residue. But these look pretty good. I'm just going to give them a quick scrub over, just to be safe. And there we go. That's pretty good. So that's basically all there is to it. You got the start button and the contact for it, and then you have all the other buttons you have to clean. So I'm going to do that real quick, and we'll get to reassembling. Okay, so the front of the case and all the buttons and contacts are clean now, so we're just going to put them back in the top half of the case. So we're just going to flip this over like so. We're just going to put our buttons in, just like this. See, this one goes here. This one goes here. Have our D-pad. The contact for the D-pad has got a couple of little knobs that it lays into, and then these just sit on top like this. There we go. Alright, so I'll set this to the side, and here we have the motherboard and screen. So what I want to do now, once again, I'm going to take a Q-tip and alcohol, and I just want to clean these pads real quick. You don't have to scrub them, I just want to make sure there's no dust. And there was a little bit of black on there, so not too bad. And if there's any other dust on the motherboard, as you see, just go ahead and wipe it off. I don't really see any right now since I blew it off, but maybe a little bit right there and here. That's all I see. So I think it's safe to say the motherboard's pretty clean. So we're preparing to install the LCD screen and the motherboard back in the top of the case. So before you do this, just look at your screen in an angle of light just to make sure there's no dust. And I do see a little bit of dust, so I'm going to go blow it off real quick just to make sure there's no dust at all, and then we're going to install it. Alright, so the screen's all clean now. So we're going to take the top of our case, set it sideways like this. I'm going to take our motherboard, and what I like to do, I'm going to set the motherboard up 90 degrees inside this area right here, and I'm going to lay the screen into its slot. But before we do that, we need to put our little foam border, whatever it is. Got it backwards here, and it sits inside these little silver knobs, just like this. Yeah, so it's just like that. So now, take our motherboard, stand it up like this, hold your screen, and you're just going to kind of lay it in. And then your motherboard will just fall into it. Now, your screen probably isn't aligned, so before you lay the motherboard down, just kind of move the screen until it kind of falls into its little slot. You have these little tabs right here, and it'll kind of, once you move it around, it'll fall in. So once that's done, you need to put your brightness control in first. So you're going to put this, have the other side raised up, put that in like so, and then you're going to put the other side down. So we'll turn this around, and your speaker wire is right here, and it just kind of fell in there. So we have a problem. One of the buttons has come undone, so I actually had it backwards. Spin it around. There we go. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing again. My mistake. I'm going to lay the screen inside. I'm going to move it till it falls into place. And we're going to put the brightness control in first. And then the motherboard will lay in. And just kind of give it a little push, and it should fall into place. So, holding this in, see our buttons are no longer sticky. And yeah, so as long as everything feels correct, you can go ahead and start putting the screws back in. Alright, so once you have all the motherboard screws back in, you can reinstall your little reflector. And it's just going to slide underneath the cartridge slot. And just be gentle as you push it in. Be warned of the capacitor that you installed right here might be in the way, so just kind of work around it. It's not too bad. Just kind of push it in there, just like that. And it'll lay down. Then you have the 4 screws that secure this. So we're going to go ahead and install those. Alright, so those are all the screws in. So we have both halves reassembled, and all there is left to do is connect them together. So just as a final warning, make sure all your capacitors are soldered in properly. If they are in backwards, something bad is going to happen. It might pop, it might start smoking or something, but just make sure that your capacitors are in properly. I've already checked over mine. I know that they're installed properly. So yeah, make 100% sure. But so we're going to go ahead and put the two halves back together. So we have our power board wire that gets installed right here. Like so. Then we have the soundboard wire that gets installed right here. And last we have the small speaker wire that gets installed here. And that's everything. So I'm going to put the case back on like so. And just kind of check the top of the unit. If it doesn't want to go together very well, you might have a capacitor that you install that's actually you know, in the way or something, so you might have to bend it a little bit. So but this one it's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and put all the screws in. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and try it out. I'm going to put my Streets of Rage 2 in here and flip it over. Apply some power. And let's see what we get. And yeah, it's working really great. This is awesome. I do see some lines on the screen, just a little bit. So I'm not sure if it's supposed to be that way. I've never actually used a Game Gear that's, you know, it's in full working condition, so I don't really know what I'm looking for, but it does look way better. Definitely. Let's change the brightness here. Yeah, brightness works pretty well. So yeah, I'd say it's fixed. I mean, this is definitely playable. If I wanted to play this, I could. So buttons work pretty well. So yeah, buttons are great. Yeah, it's working. So that's awesome. So, but we're not quite finished yet. I still want to clean the unit. The outside of the unit's kind of dirty, and there's fingerprints on here on the screen protector, and along the edge there's like that same black dust or whatever. It's kind of like caked up along the edge. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that off, and I'm going to clean the screen protector too. Alright, so got the unit all cleaned up, and we're done, guys. That was it. I gotta say, I'm really impressed with the fix here. I mean, it really works well, replacing other capacitors, and with the unit all cleaned up and it being dust free, I gotta say I'm really impressed. So just want to turn the unit around. I do have the B6 engine in here, and it does work. There's no external power. So, you know, I get about 30 minutes playtime with our 6 batteries here. But yeah, I'm really impressed with the fix here. So hopefully you guys learned something. Hopefully you can fix your own Game Gear since I know it's like a real common problem for the capacitors to go bad. So I'll see you next time.